Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. Today we are going to talk about neuromodulation as applied to Parkinson's disease. It's a technology worth keeping an eye on because we're hearing it a lot more. So that we thought today we'd start with Parkinson's and delve into where the technology is at and how it is helping people. Joining me today, I have Benjamin Stecher. He is a speaker, author, and Parkinson's disease advocate. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 29 years old. And also joining us is Dr. Alfonso Fasano. He's a neurologist who holds the chair in neuromodulation at the University of Toronto. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. I'm going to presume not everybody knows what neuromodulation is. So, Dr. Fasano, let's start with you. What's neuromodulation?
Well, you can ask this question to Ben as well. At this point, Ben knows more than me, probably. But anyways, as the chair in neuromodulation, I feel I need to answer the question. So neuromodulation is just a general term that we use to modulate the activity of tissues like neurons. As people probably know, neurons use electricity to communicate with each other, and they're like electric wires. And so most neuromodulation techniques are indeed using electricity delivered in different ways to modulate the action of neurons.
Is that a physical implant in the brain?
Well, there are different ways. There are invasive and non-invasive forms of neuromodulation. The invasive ones are treatments like vagal nerve stimulation, spinal cord stimulation, and indeed deep brain stimulation, which is what Ben and I can focus on. Non-invasive ways are techniques like TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, TDCS, and there are many others. They're appealing to some extent because they can neuromodulate without an implant. The downside of these approaches is that they don't lead to permanent effects because, of course, after the neuromodulation is being removed from the body, then the effect little by little goes away. But these are still useful in rehabilitation settings or to explore new targets for the future. So, and these new targets will be then treated with invasive treatments.
Okay, and Ben, tell us, let's back up a little bit just to give people a little bit of context about you and your journey. You were diagnosed at 29 years old. It's been about a decade since you first received that diagnosis. Can you tell me first a little bit about the early symptoms and then how you became familiar and how you found out about neuromodulation?
Sure. So my first symptoms were a tremor in my right hand that slowly progressed, as well as some bradykinesia as well, some slowness of movement that I was experiencing. Then those progressed, and I got to the point where I realized how much trouble I was in. I then came back home from China where I was working at the time, and I found Dr. Fasano's clinic, and he was the one that really introduced me to not only neuromodulation, but this whole world of Parkinson's research. And from there, I kind of took off and I explored the world. I traveled all over the place, seeking out the best minds I could to see who had the best solutions for what was the problem with me. I found the best solutions out here in Toronto, funny enough. With at his clinic, where 3 years ago I got this new type of deep brain simulator implanted in me.
So you actually got the invasive kind. Actually, they put an implant into your brain. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so up here, I don't know if you can see clearly, but I have two kind of burr holes that have been dug through my skull. 6 inches in both parts of my brain, there are electrodes. There's a battery in my chest, and there's wires that have been tunneled through my neck. And this is what allows me to live again. Like right now, I'm not really on any kind of medication at all. And that's a result of having done this new type of deep brain stimulation therapy. That's the kind that I have those adaptive so that means that it's actually modulating the signal based on the output that's coming out from the electrode. We can talk about that more in detail if your listeners are interested. But yeah, so I got this done about 3 years ago, like I said, and it's what's powering my life right now.
So you had frequent tremors prior to the invasive neuro to the implants. Now that you have the implants, do you have tremors anymore?
I still have some tremor from time to time, but tremor is not it's the most obvious symptom of Parkinson's, but it's not the one that bothers me the most. The biggest ones were things like dystonia, which is that curling of the muscles and the spasming of the muscle that patients often experience, and bradykinesia. And dyskinesia as well, which is like this involuntary movements that people get. All three of those have been almost completely wiped away because of this new uh, procedure that I had. I still have some mild tremor from time to time. I still have some. My walking can be slow and it's a little bit impaired, but it's like night and day compared to what it was beforehand.
And that's amazing. So it's been 3 years, and that's consistently kept your symptoms at bay. Is that right? For the most part.
For the most part, yes, but I still have to go back to my clinic from time to time, about every 3 months, it looks like right now, for them to make small adjustments to the settings on my simulator.
Okay, so how, Dr. Fasano, how are those electrical signals getting, like, how are they modulated in the brain? Are there times where it needs more modulation than others? And how does that whole system work? It's fascinating.
Yeah, it certainly is. And right now, Ben is coming relatively often for a number of reasons, including the fact that we're learning still how to better use this technology. Deep brain stimulation has been around for 3 decades, and it's been doing a good job. But right now, we are trying to make it even better. And this is when adaptive stimulation might make the difference. And to answer your question, the same electrodes that are implanted in Ben's brain are able to record the neuronal activity. And we now have a sort of biomarker telling us when Parkinson's is flaring up. That is called beta. Beta is a certain frequency these neurons are firing at. And when that signal is picked up by the stimulator, this is the signal that the stimulator itself wants to reduce. And so based on that, the power of the stimulation will go up and down to reduce the amount of beta to the physiological level, because we all have some beta in the brain, but in Parkinson's is more than usual. So that's basically what's happening.
And then, so is there a computer that you hook up Ben up to see what's happening? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, maybe one part that we should clarify is that Ben showed where the electrodes are, but they are connected to a battery pack that is placed under his right collarbone. So it's a little computer also with a battery, and the electrodes are connected to extension wires that run under the skin. So it's everything in the body, and in theory, it can go wherever. It can travel. It can doesn't need to be here in Toronto and see me necessarily all the time. And I'm sure he will avoid seeing me so many times. But it doesn't have to be physically here for the stimulation to occur. Stimulation occurs all the time. The reason we meet every once in a while is to adjust the settings, because the disease, and this is something important to stress for the audience, is not a steady disease. It's a disease that tends to change over time. And so we're trying to modulate the parameters. The idea is that in the future, it won't be needed, this particular part, it won't be needed anymore, because the stimulator itself will learn and will adjust even well beyond what it can do automatically right now.
Right, and not surprising, we're getting a question in to Ben. Do you have any side effects from this therapy? Do you feel anything that?
There's one. There are some weird things. Like for example, there's certain activities that require a lot of like bilateral upper and lower body control, like swimming, for example. It's something I can't really do anymore. Maybe with proper training though, and if I got some more therapists who could specialize in those kind of things, then that would help me a lot. But right now, that's one activity that's kind of off limits for me. Um, and
Wait,
then
sorry,
there's
can you
like
go into a little bit why exactly can't you swim?
well, maybe Alfonso can answer that one as well. But from my perspective, anyway, it's like the computer. It's like it's constantly having to think about what do I need? What do I need at any given moment of the day? And suddenly, if I plunge myself into a different environment, the things that I need are very different in that environment than if I'm just walking around like living my life. That's just my perspective, though. I'm sure that there's something more technical that I'm missing that Alfonso maybe can fill us in on.
Now, maybe we can just clarify, because otherwise people will be concerned that swimming is impossible, but it's a bit more complicated than that. The stimulation makes sure that movements are fluid and fast enough, but sometimes for a complex motor task, what we need is fine coordination between the different groups of muscles, between the upper and lower body, as you heard, the right and the left. And so because the disease doesn't go away, this is not a cure, unfortunately, this is a treatment. But people feel good, as you heard from Ben. So in the past, what we've seen is that people start going back to anything they used to do 20 years before. And there have been some cases where people unfortunately died because they went to the sea and say, okay, now I'm feeling much better. Let me go for a swim of half an hour. So there are limits to what we can do, and there are also limits related to the fact that we are aging. I mean, Ben is young, but still is aging like all of us, and also the conditioning plays a big role, because if for years you haven't done much because of a disease, once that disease is under control, it's not that right away you can go and do all you want. You need to slowly start and make sure that your overall health is in good control, and you're exercising, which is at the end of the day really something that can change the future of anybody. So exercising. But yes, for more fine motor tasks, DBS itself can make things more complicated. This is something we also see in musicians. Maybe they're looking great, they don't have visible signs of Parkinson's, but they can tell you that when they try to use their fingers in a more complex fashion, this is where they feel that it's not as good as it used to be.
So can you explain to us, those of us who don't really know, what exactly is happening in the Parkinson's brain? I mean, I know the Alzheimer's brain quite well, but actually what is happening inside for this kind of deep brain stimulation to help the symptoms?
This is for me or for Ben? Because
Either
let me
one
tell
of
you
you.
that.
I'm sure you both
Okay.
have.
Yeah, I can just make a little preface to Ben's answer. So Ben has decided to dedicate his life to understanding this disease. And one thing he will tell you is that the more you dig into Parkinson's, the less you know. Because it's a complex syndrome. It's not just a single disease coming from different causes. And Ben really has traveled the world, has spoken to, I don't know, many hundreds of researchers in the field. So I guess he's the right person to answer what's going on in Parkinson's brain. I just want to say that Ben is an incredible example to everybody out there, not just with Parkinson's, with any disease, that when you have a diagnosis, it's your chance to decide whether to be a passive product of what happened to you, or decide to take ownership and do all you can to help yourself and possibly help others, which is what Ben did.
Yeah, which is amazing, Ben. It's amazing that you are serving as an example for so many people, and there's no other better voice than the voice of the patient, right? In that first person experience. So thank you for doing so. So explain to us, Ben, from your perspective, what's going on in your brain, after diagnosis of Parkinson's. Oops, sorry. Sorry.
So yeah, so it is as Alfonso was alluding to, it is a degenerative condition. So something that's getting worse and worse over time. However, what exactly is happening is something that's up for a lot of debate. In my humble opinion, I don't think anybody's really qualified to know exactly what's going on. I think, in my opinion, again, it's part of the spectrum of neurodegeneration that we see across Alzheimer's, dementia, ALS, FTD to some extent. I mean, there's just things happening that we just don't understand very clearly right now. But what is clear and why treatments like TBS works is that there's a part of our brains that is slowly fading away over time. Um, it seems to be happening in places like the SN, in the subthalamic nucleus, and the substantia nigra, and in the VTA first, but nobody knows exactly where it begins either. And that's the tricky part about knowing exactly how to treat each individual that comes into a comes into a clinic like Alfonso's there. And this is the question I would love to ask Alfonso, actually, if I can. How would you know, or what were the biggest clues that DBS was the best therapy for me? And for other patients out there who might also be struggling with diagnosis like Parkinson's, how will they know if this will actually work for them or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Ben, as you can tell, is already taking your role here, and
I'm gonna go away now. You guys continue.
that's classic Ben. Actually, Ben and I just wrote a book describing our experiences and how the partnership worked, and I can tell you was as challenging as it can be today for me to write a book with it. But it was also a lot of fun. So I'll quickly say that in this book, and that's why I'm going there, there's a chapter where Ben talks about the cards that we are dealt, and this is life. You know, we have issues, problems, and then there are also solutions that are offered to us. And this is to say that not everybody is a good candidate for deep brain stimulation, and DBS or deep brain stimulation is not the only treatment. And there are many other things, including doing nothing. It's not that you have to necessarily do something. But what's important is to be aware. So awareness and good relationship and communication with your care provider is key, because then there's a best solution that together you get to. And when it came to Ben's case, we were actually debating what was this best solution. Because now I just need you to realize that it was me, the neurologist, seeing a patient, Ben, who's meanwhile traveled the world and spoke with all researchers and knows exactly what's happening in every lab and knows what's going to happen in the future and which ones are the trials. You know, Ben knew about stem cell treatment and gene therapy and all of that. And the reason why we decided to go for DBS in the case of Ben is because it was the treatment already approved with the highest level of evidence that it will make a difference in terms of quality of life. So there are certain treatments that are very promising, but because of the lack of certainty, you might not want to go there, especially if your quality of life is suffering. If you want to have a rapid solution, it's better to go to established treatments for which we know what to expect. Now, in this case in particular, yes, we went for something established like DBS, but this is the twist that at some point we describe also in the book, because we said, okay, we'll do DBS, but we also explore this new way of doing DBS, which is adaptive deep brain stimulation.
Okay, let me ask that question a little bit differently though. Who wouldn't be a candidate for this?
Yes, so probably I can answer this question. There are different reasons not to be a candidate for these treatments. First of all, this is a brain operation, and therefore some people might be too frail to go for it. If they are too old, or if they have already a brain that has suffered for years, and maybe there are also vascular problems like many strokes in the brain. That would be one reason. Another reason would be people with particular problems like balance problems, cognitive problems, because we know that in these people, if we were to do a brain operation, chances are is that we can make those particular problems worse. Yeah, maybe we can treat the tremor, we can treat all the classic signs of the disease, but those particular issues that are actually the reason why the person is looking into surgery in the first place might not improve or might get even worse. Another example would be speech. And then there are many others, including expectations and motivations of the patients. We want people that go through this process to be motivated, to be, again, as I mentioned earlier, active participants of their care. But at the same time, if they come with excessive expectations, being cured, we don't think that they are good candidates, because they're going to be depressed afterwards. They're going to be disappointed. And in fact, in the past, we had also cases of suicide 20 years ago or so, when we didn't really know how to even portray this process to patients. Some people really got disappointed. And that, together with drastic medication reduction that can happen with DBS, led to severe depression and suicide, unfortunately.
Ben, what does it feel like to have these things here in your skull? Can you feel it? Are you cognizant of it at all times?
No, I'm not, thankfully. I gotta say, like the team that they have in Toronto is a fabulous team, and they really know how to do it in such a way that's minimally invasive. But it was a big problem. I could obviously feel it like in the months after I had the surgery. And even now, because I just actually had a battery replacement about 2 weeks ago, I can still feel the battery implant, this new battery implant that I have here in my chest. And if I do like press here, then I do feel obviously that something like there's something alien in my chest, and there's nothing no going around that. And I do still feel the wiring through my neck as well. Um, and I still have these bumps on my head, but they're not that big of a deal for me.
Wouldn't have
But
noticed.
yeah.
Donna is asking a question to you, Ben, and asking, in your opinion, is beta the right feedback signal for adaptive DBS? You're going to have to kind of translate a little bit of this. And have you had significant improvements in managing your symptoms with adaptive over regular? And can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, so there was a period of time where we were trying out whether continuous is better for me or adaptive was better. Continuous just means that it's firing at the same steady at the same steady rate. throughout the day. Adaptive means that it's reading out the activity and it's actually trying to better simulate according to my specific needs. I would say that adaptive has been better for me so far. That could just be my own biases, though, and I'm very biased. And I have to admit my biases as well and be very open about that. Because as a participant, and I'm still a participant in this new Adapt PD trial as well. So all that's kind of clouding my judgment to some degree anyway. But I do feel as if this adaptive signal is better for me. What beta means is that I think a certain frequency at which every neuron in your brain pulsates. It's pulsating between 17 and 37 hertz, I think. Although I could be wrong. Alfonso, please correct me if I am. Um, but yeah, so it's taking out that reading and then it's modulating the simulation from the battery according to that reading that it's getting. It's trying also to match it to my symptoms, but it's not doing a perfect job with that right now, although it seems to be getting better and better over time as well. I do feel better today than I felt right after the surgery and after we turned on this adaptive for the first time, although it's still far from perfect, and I hope that it'll continue to get better as we go forward in the future. Because right now it's only modulating the amplitude of the wave. There's also the frequency and the shape of the wave that I hope in the future devices, although I might not be lucky enough to have them, but whatever. I do hope that future devices will look at actually modulating those other parameters as well, because I think that those are also part of this disease. And they're part of actually better treating patients like myself.
So let me ask you something. You just said, I feel a lot better than when I first got. So tell me a little bit about that. Is that just because you had to work on getting the right frequency and stabilized according to, your symptoms, or what do you mean exactly when it's better than it was? Were you just after the surgery, were you seeing the symptoms were still apparent and now they're a lot less? Like, what exactly does that mean?
Well, for example, and this is something I give Alfonso and his team a lot of credit for, is that they've done a very good job learning for me what works for each patient that comes into their office. So to further complicate this whole procedure is that there's 4 contact points at the end of each electrode. At the beginning, and this is what they thought soon after my surgery was done, they thought that I would only need to light up the second to bottommost electrode. However, we've learned over time that I actually respond better if we light up the second and the third one together. Now, Alfonso can talk about that in more detail than I can, obviously. But so it's been this continual learning process of what's working for me as a patient. And then they've been kind enough and they've had the time and the energy to actually help me better live my life as a result of all the input that I've given them.
So who's
Yeah.
controlling that? Like, let's say you need more in one area than the other. Is that Alfonso at a computer, or like, what does that all look like? I'm fascinating. Like when you need to change a frequency or you need more on, you were talking about in this area, what does that look like?
I tend to defer to Alfonso for that because I always have to go back to the clinic then
Mm.
whenever I need those kinds of bigger changes. But the amplitude of the wave, that's changing by itself. That's the algorithm at work. Everything else is Alfonso's magic, and
So
that's the real
is the
artistry of
al
being a neurologist as well.
is the algorithm reading what you need at certain moments and adapting accordingly? So that's
Yes.
fascinating. And then when he comes back to the office, what do you do, Alfonso?
Yeah, maybe the other missing part, practically speaking, is that the programmer, in this case, the neurologist, myself, will use a special tablet. And so we program the device communicating with a wireless system. I have a tablet, simple like that. And with that tablet, I can control certain parameters. And importantly, when it comes to amplitude, which is a much stimulation to give, I don't need to set a certain parameter. I set a range. And that range, goes up and down depending on how much beta there is in in Ben's brain. Beta is just one of the biomarkers. Going back to Donna's question, we are learning now all the other biomarkers. We know that other frequencies are encoding for tremor, others for involuntary movements, others just for voluntary movements. So the good thing about all we're doing right now is that we're also happening to learn more about how the brain works in general, regardless of the disease.
Yeah,
The hope
it's
is that
that's
soon that will be.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, the hope is that soon that will be applied to other diseases as well.
Well,
I
that
know that
would,
there's also clinical trials going on for all sorts of other indications.
and how would that work? I mean, how would that, like, is it being applied to different types of dementias, like Alzheimer's disease that we know of?
Maybe I can take that one. So for Alzheimer's, there have been studies, a quite promising small initial study followed by a double-blind randomized controlled trial that unfortunately was negative. Again, it's important to explain what these trials were, because they were portrayed as DBS for Alzheimer's disease, but in my opinion, this was more DBS for memory. Because the electrode was placed in another structure of the brain called the fornix, which is used to enhance learning. So it's the circuit in function when we want to learn new things or want to remember something that we're told, for example. So DBS can probably help memory consolidation, but it doesn't offer solutions long term. It doesn't address the degeneration. The interesting thing about the second trial that I was talking about, the bigger one that was negative, is that when researchers started to look into the data, they realized that a group of people did better than others. And they saw that the difference was mainly related to age. And to their surprise, they found that people with an age at onset, at age of surgery above 65, did better than the young onset dementias. And the third trial is now ongoing with some problems, and this third trial, as you can imagine, is only enrolling people above the age of 65. But again, it will be a treatment for memory, not for Alzheimer's in general.
Is there an option for people who don't want to have the invasive DBS to have the non-invasive? What do we know about that in terms of its efficacy?
Yeah, so probably the one treatment that everybody's thinking about right now is MRI guided focused ultrasound. So a little step back. We know that certain parts of the brain is working too much. In Parkinson's, there are at least two nuclei that are doing too much of a bad job. The subthalamus, which is the target where the electrodes are implanted in the case of Ben, but another one will be the globus pallidus. Now, either we control the activity of these neurons with electricity or we kill these neurons, we will expect to see the same results, with the difference that, as you can imagine, killing neurons is irreversible. And if you have problems, you cannot get rid of them. So focused ultrasound is a way to kill these neurons without opening the skull. It consists in shooting over 1,000 acoustic waves from different angles, and they all converge in the spot of the brain that we want to lesion, that we want to get rid of. And this has been done for Parkinson's using two different targets, actually three different targets. The thalamus, which helps the tremor, the globus pallidus, which helps dyskinesias and to some extent the other problems of the disease, and even the subthalamus, where Ben has electrodes, is being lesioned using ultrasound. However, like I said already, this is an irreversible procedure, and people think that simply because there is no opening and they just lie down in their special MRI machine, that this is not a surgical intervention. Instead, it is. It is a brain operation like any other. It is appealing because there is no opening of the skull, the skin, but it still carries
However,
risks.
You're penetrating the brain-blood barrier, right, with focused ultrasound?
No, that's something else. The same technology, focused ultrasound, can be combined, changing the type of the power, and so it's a lower intensity focused ultrasound combined with IV injection of micro bubbles. So these bubbles oscillates while they're under the effect of the ultrasound. So we can basically make them get bigger when they're in certain parts of the brain. They're circulating in the bloodstream, and when they are exposed to ultrasound, they get bigger and they vibrate basically. And this creates an opening of the so-called blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier that protects the brain, which is good to have, but that also comes with downsides. For example, if you want to deliver specific treatments to the brain, chemotherapy in case of cancer, or gene therapy in case of experimental treatment, these molecules or virus cannot get into the brain. So now the idea is to combine opening the blood-brain barrier with focused ultrasound and microbubbles, so that whatever intervention you're offering the patient can penetrate the brain, and not just the brain at large, the brain in that particular spot. So that's actually very interesting.
Okay, and we're getting more questions in that I want to. is there a path from treatment to cure, and what do we need to get there?
Is it for me or for Ben? Because I think Ben has an answer.
Okay,
Let's
Ben, you
let's see.
answer this one. And
Let's see
then,
what he
okay.
says.
So at the moment, I would say that the path from treatment to cure, it's a blurry one, but there's a lot of hope that your life will improve after you get a proper diagnosis and if you get seen by proper specialists like Dr. Fasano. However, that's a key part. It's a very difficult thing for a lot of patients to actually get to actually be under the care of somebody like Alfonso there, because most patients don't have access to that kind of specialists and those kinds of care centers. Um, However, like the ultimate goal is still to cure these diseases. I don't see anything coming online soon that will actually stop this degenerative process, but I do see that these DBS systems are getting better and better over time. I hope that over time it'll continue to improve. It'll continue to address more symptoms, and then it'll be using more nuclei, and then hopefully one day, I mean, in my opinion, these diseases are the symptoms. I think what we see is like I can't feel the degeneration happening in my brain. I can feel the tremor, but I can't feel these clumps of alpha-synuclein forming. So I think if we could do more to actually try and address the symptoms, I think we would be a long way further in actually helping more people.
So Ben, tell us a little bit more. I mean, you described some of your symptoms like the tremors, and then you said like, your hands kind of curled. Before you had this treatment, you were what, 7 years or so into after diagnosis. So tell us a little bit about your experience. Like, did you feel like you were declining? And then once you got the deep brain stimulation, um, what changed exactly? I mean, is it that you seldom feel a symptom? Is it just only occasionally when something's going wrong with the machine? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So prior to getting this DBS, I was declining pretty rapidly at the time. Also, the world felt like it was at the height of the COVID pandemic, and so the world felt like it was kind of declining all around me. All that stress and all that accumulated and made me feel a lot worse than I otherwise would. I was very dystonic, which meant I had that posturing of my hands like that. I had a very pronounced tremor, like I was saying, and I had bradykinesia as well. So my movements were all very slow, especially when I didn't have any medication in me. But then and you can see videos of this online if you want, but as soon as Alfonso turned on this DBS for me for the first time, I felt as if like the whole world had been like lifted off my shoulders. Like it was a complete relief, and it was very sudden too. It was even faster than I was expecting it, but it was that immediate relief that was very stark and very surprising even to me. I mean, it was kind of like the best expectations for what I was hoping for. But until he actually turned it on, I didn't know that I was going to experience the full benefits of this procedure. But then once he did, I knew that okay, I made the right choice and I was in good hands.
That's amazing. I mean, that it would happen so quickly. And then from there, I guess, is the challenge just keeping it consistent, like adjusting so that you stay at that consistent, consistency.
Yeah, basically.
So Donna's asking Dr. Fasano, when are the results from the adaptive DBS clinical trials going to be released? I've heard that adaptive DBS really didn't show better symptoms control, but it did conserve battery power and battery life.
The results have been released in poster format during the major conference that we have, an international conference called Movement Disorder Society Conference. It was last year in Denmark, and the results have shown that adaptive stimulation works and it's safe. Now, ADAPT PD, which is the trial that we're talking about and the trial that Ben alluded to, was meant to show that adaptive stimulation is safe and it's better than nothing. So, and in that sense, it's a positive trial, and it's probably the trial leading to approval. And actually, I should also say that in Japan, this treatment is already approved. So probably little by little, all countries will have the approval. The key question, which we don't really have an answer yet, is whether adaptive stimulation is superior to continuous classic stimulation. And if so, for what type of problem and for what type of patient. And that's why there are other trials coming up. In Toronto, we have a trial that is just started called Canada trial, which stands for Continuous versus Adaptive Deep Brain Stimulation, blah, blah, blah. And the goal is exactly to look at whether gait, speech, balance is better when people have adaptive stimulation versus continuous in a double-blind fashion. And we're focusing on gait, balance, and speech because, first of all, these are not well treated with current treatments, including continuous DBS. And second, because they are major determinants of quality of life of people. So we'll see.
So I guess the next question, like how hard was this to find, Ben? I mean, you know, not everyone probably is as diligent a researcher to seek people all over the world to find the very best. However, I'm wondering for the people who are watching this, can they go to their doctors and say, hey, I want to try DBS, or will they get a blank stare back in many cases? I mean, where are we in terms of familiarity and really using the technology?
Well, it depends entirely on where they happen to live and where their closest neurological office is. If they're in one of the bigger centers like New York or San Francisco or Toronto, then I would say that yeah, they probably do have access to this kind of therapies. But if they happen to live somewhere where they don't have access to the best therapists in the world, they are gonna then maybe continuous might be even better for them. Because adaptive, it does require like another level of expertise and it does require more fine tuning from what I've seen anyway. Um, and so, yeah, that'd be my basic recommendation. If they happen to live in a big city center that has access to some of the best neurological minds in the world, then they can probably get this adaptive version. If not, then I think continuous is also available for most patients as well,
Is
no
is
matter
it
where.
is it expensive or is it affordable? Like, it sounds like you have to go to the neurologist a lot to get things tweaked.
It can be pretty pricey if you're paying for everything out of pocket. I think a lot of insurance companies, though, if you're living in America, it does cover it. It's one of the advantages of being here in Canada as well,
Canada,
though.
move to
Yeah,
Canada.
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
But if I can add something to this, because Ben obviously as a patient advocate is concerned that a lot of people will not have access to treatments. But I would say generally speaking, in Western countries, there is a good understanding of DBS, and you don't necessarily need to go for adaptive DBS. I think, or DBS even. So I think the message is that that people go to their neurologist and ask. So okay, what's on the table for me? I heard about DBS. Is it good or not? And if not, why? So it's good to start a relationship and a collaboration with your neurologist and ask questions. That's all you need to do. And most likely the neurologist will know what to say. And if not, change neurologist, of course.
How
And if you're
far
not
do
sure about
you, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
if you're not sure about which questions to even ask, you can buy our new book, Reprogramming the Brain. Because in there
Yes, I
we
would.
actually write out a checklist of all the different questions that patients should be asking their
Okay, and I
neurologist.
am going to give your book a plug because I love it when patients and doctors write together. It's really giving both sides of the equation. So, is it available on Amazon now? It's out and available on Amazon? Is that, how do people get it?
Not yet, but you can pre-order it right now on Amazon or anywhere you get books.
Okay, reprogramming the brain. Put that on your list because I'm sure you're going to get a lot more details than you are just in this talk. But thank you to both of you for sharing. I mean, I mean it when I say the dynamism of having both perspectives is incredible. And Ben, if all patients could be like you, you know, I think the world would be a lot better off because you know, you really are asking the right questions and have obviously found a treatment that is working. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I just actually want to end it on one question. How far away do you think we are from using this technology, neuromodulation, to treat other dementias? Is it way down the pipeline, or are we getting closer? Maybe Dr. Alfonso, you can answer that.
Yeah, I don't think we're close. I might be wrong, but like I said, these are complex diseases. In a way, Parkinson's is an easier problem because, as you heard from Ben earlier, the neurodegeneration starts from a single spot in the brain. We know what parts of the brain are not really working. In dementia, there are more areas of the brain affected, and Dementia affects functions that are very complex and are difficult to replace. I might be wrong also because technology is interesting because it's an exponential growth, because from one discovery, you get to 2, 3, 4, and so forth. For example, the trial I was telling you earlier about Fornix DBS wasn't intended to be for memory problems or dementia. It was serendipity. It was DBS done to treat obesity. And during surgery, the patient was awake during surgery. The surgeons here in Toronto, Dr. Lozano, turned the stimulation on, and the patient started remembering things from the past. And then they noticed that the higher the stimulation, the more clear this memory was forming in this person's brain. So from that serendipitous discovery, they decided to do a little trial, and then things evolved, like I said. So you never know. It's important to keep a curious mindset, to be at the same time careful and not, being so excited about anything you may hear on the internet. To fund research, so fundraising is very important because a lot more can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, is there anything else that you want to add or say before we go?
That patients out there, my message basically is pretty simple. Don't let other people just define this disease for you. You should try and go out and do the best that you possibly can with the tools that you have to define it for yourself. I think that would be that's a big that's one of the biggest lessons I learned along the way as well. And do what you can to surround yourself with good people as well. Having a great team around you, having people who care about you, that will make the difference between having good outcomes versus bad outcomes in many cases.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Ben Stecher and Alfonso Fasano. It's rare to find a dynamic team like the two of you. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Don't forget to buy the book, Reprogramming the Brain. Will be out soon. You can pre-order it on Amazon. Thanks to both of you for sharing your stories, and keep us posted and let us know what comes next.
We will. Thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. If you missed any of this interview, don't forget to go to beingpatient.com. We'll publish it. You can see it again. Send us any questions you may have. We'll follow up. Thanks everyone for watching. See you next time.